Hey everybody, welcome to Trusted Life Circle. Today we're here with Jessica Nye. We're going to have a conversation with Jessica. She's an expert in the senior caregiving space, particularly transitioning and preparing for caring for a loved one. We'll let you speak more specifically in terms of that specialty. But today we're just going to have a conversation and go through some of the most important things you need to keep in mind as you're beginning to care for a loved one and what that road might look like ahead. So welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today and to share what I've learned through my career, and hopes that it can help some other people and at least give a starting point for approaching care and transitions of care. So thanks for having me.
Of course. And obviously I have a bit of a personal history with Jessica. Jessica was the specialist that worked with my family in transitioning my mother from home care to her care facility now, and we had a really great experience with Jessica. She's been in the back of my mind as someone to talk to as we've gotten this project off the ground. And I remember at the beginning of that process, I was really nervous, and I had been caring for my mother at home for coming up on 3 years at the time, and I was pretty conflicted as far as getting her from home to a facility and whether that was going to be the right move. Do you remember how I was at the...
I remember that you and your brother and we really had to take a leap of faith and know that, we were going to be there shoulder to shoulder to help get it through. And, I know that you guys really struggled with when was the right time. And, I think hindsight's always 20/20, right? And so, looking back, I think it was the right time. And I believe now she's doing really well there and has friends and has a sense of community. And so, but I do remember, us going through the process together, and really I appreciated the trust that you put in me, right? Because that was probably one of the hardest decisions you ever had to make.
Yes, it definitely at the time, and in hindsight, I'm so glad I did make it. I think we did hit a sweet spot in regards to the right time for my mom, because she transitioned very seamlessly. And that was what I was being told along the way, that give it a few days and it's like they've been blossoming here for years, and that was the case for my mom after a few weeks of just her getting the rhythm of things. And I really, in my experience, I think it's the independence that she was granted back in her life to just kind of freely walk about, even though her floor, she's in memory care, and her floor doesn't have access freely for her to the elevator or to go outside. We can definitely take her there, but she needs supervision. But just being able to wander and to explore, to kind of be in her own authority was something that I think really put her in a better place. And then the social dynamic of it too. We basically had someone one-on-one with my mom at all times. It was me outside of normal business hours, and then we had a few different caregivers that would come during the weekdays, during the business hours. So she always had someone, but it was just one person. And so the fact that my mom has a whole group of staff that she's interacting with, they're tapping in every 8 hours or so and getting refreshed. I saw that I think the social element and her neighbors and residents has also, I think, gone a really long way for her. So that's just my personal experience. But what does it look like with families that are coming to you? Is it similar to?
Yes, I think that there's a lot of different sides when you're looking to that next level, right? And looking at your loved one, your mom, your parents, your dad, your aunt, your uncle, and really, identifying that loss of independence, right? Like when you transition into a community, like you have to now adhere to the cadence of that community, right? Breakfast is kind of their breakfast hours and their lunch hours, and the activities that you used to maybe, do at your leisure now have changed. And so that can be a struggle. And I think when you were a good example of, you were identifying that you were kind of meeting your capacity as a caregiver, right? That you had your professional responsibilities, and then, your mom needed this additional support, and you were tapped into all these caregivers and making it work, but it kind of was starting to become a second job for you to be able to get all the care she needed so that she could be safe, right? Because the nature of her personality is she liked to be out and about and wanted to be, in the community and doing things. And so I think that was really important when we looked at what community was the right fit, was to make sure that the programs that they had matched with her interests, right? And that there was a sense of a peer group there for her. So, yeah.
Well, Jessica, I gave a little bit of an introduction in terms of what you do, but you want to speak to that from your own experience?
Sure. So I've spent most of my career supporting families through transitions of care. And so started my career as a direct care provider in occupational therapy, where I did neuro rehab and acute care in a hospital setting. I've worked in community-based programs as well as hospital-based and critical care transitions, and then also was director of patient relations for a small specialty hospital, and then now working in the senior care industry, I'm director of operations for By Your Side Care Management.
Wow. So, how many families have you worked with over this career?
A lot. I feel I have really been privileged to meet some people at the hardest, most challenging points of their life, and have had a great opportunity for them to trust me and to know that, the steps I'm giving them are going to be helpful. And sometimes people take that advice and sometimes they don't. But I feel really privileged walking shoulder to shoulder with a lot of families.
Yeah, I think from my experience, I probably had phone calls back and forth with your agency for a few months. Maybe even went from fall to spring by the time I was ready to actually meet. And it was definitely a process. I was skeptical and not ready, until I was. And we had more. I guess I had to have more evidence and proof that it's time, and that was the thing, it was like I was being as preventative as possible until there's a fall or something like that, where it's just proving, hey, we need more advanced care. And by the time that was happening at my household, that was when I was ready to call. And so, did you have personal experience with any of your family members or anything like that?
So, both of my parents have passed away, and I helped them navigate very different end-of-life challenges. And I do think that's always a piece of what I hold, right, is that, I was young when they had passed away, and knowing what I know now, I would have made different decisions, but I really have kind of made my peace with, I made the decisions I made at that time with the information that I had, and I did the best I could, and so I think that's probably my draw. My grandfather had dementia and Parkinson's, and I always say, like, we do so much better now in memory care than we used to. And I remember being young and going to visit him in, the nursing home, and I always said, he had his stupid George sweatshirt on that, and he just sat there and he watched TV, and, it was that shell of who he once was. He was a really robust German man, and so it was hard to see that. And so I think I understand from that perspective what families go through, you know, that challenge and just not knowing who to trust and where to turn, and that can be really difficult. So,
well, thanks for sharing that story. It's very relatable, and I think relatable to a lot of people listening out there. You mentioned that the memory care industry is doing better. How have you seen it improve since your experience with
I
your
think
loved
now
ones?
it's a lot more of an enriched program, and I think we see a lot of different types of memory care and philosophies, and even, you know, styles of how care is provided. So I think that it's important when you're looking at a memory care that you understand and ask the questions as far as, like, you know, what does your enrichment look like? Where do you focus your time and energy? What are your care capabilities if my loved one becomes really sick and has to go to the hospital? Can they come back here? Can they not come back here? You know, what type of services are included in our monthly rent, right? So there's a lot of really great opportunities to have some different programs within the memory care umbrella. And so I always think it's really important to just make sure that you're looking for a memory care that makes sense with your values and with your loved one's values.
How have you seen, you know, with my mom's case, she was a bit younger. I believe she's 72 now. But she was diagnosed when she was 67. What kind of age range are you seeing when people are starting to come to you?
Yeah, I think we do now see, and it could just be the nature of what I swim in every day, right? Is that we do see some younger diagnosis of dementia and Alzheimer's, and there's, you know, several reasons behind that, right? That we're better now at recognizing it. There's some testing available, and there really is a push to educate the medical community as far as, you know, there are some medicines now that people have access to that they didn't before. So, you know, whenever you're looking and seeing mild cognitive changes, that's a great time to go talk to your physician, right? And they have some real easy cognitive assessments they can just do right there in the office, because memory loss is a normal part of aging, but you want to watch for when it really starts to interfere with your ability to live your life. And so early diagnosis and really early intervention is key to being able to live longer, more cognitively intact, if possible.
Are most people that you're working with, do they have a formal diagnosis?
Yeah, so people come for care management for a lot of different reasons. Usually we see clients that have a new diagnosis of dementia, or they have medical comorbidities that are starting to compound, and so they're having some struggles at home. We see family lives out of state, or this person really is low supported, and those are people that are reaching out to us to help to get advocacy and really a plan of care in place, because you have to put the steps together in order to, you know, end up in a successful and good environment, right? Just because someone is starting to have cognitive changes doesn't mean, oh, memory care is it right now, right? There's steps to get there. And so using your resources wisely keeps you in the driver's seat of where you end up.
Yeah, so in my case, by the time I came to you, we were at the memory care tour stage. What are all the steps in regards to what you service or what you suggest to a family when they start noticing that cognitive impairment starting to signal?
Yeah. So after you see your primary care physician, I think it's really important that you continue to find opportunities to engage in cognitive, physical, social activities. So there's a lot of great resources out there through, the Aging and Disability Resource Center can point you in direction of some community centers. The YMCA has great programs. If you're in Milwaukee County, there's a whole falls prevention coalition. So there's a program called Stepping Up, which is great to help you train your balance. So just seeking those opportunities. For future planning, you want to have a discussion with your loved one to understand, what if their condition worsens? Where do they see themselves being? How much medical treatment do they want? What does the end of their life look like? What are their values in both life and death? And what does end of life care mean for them?
Yeah, it's kind of overwhelming thinking about all the things to do, but in my case, my mom was still coherent enough. I mean, it's a really gray area. I mean, to this day, even 4 years later, I needed to get a signature from my mom recently for an adjustment on the POA, and she was able to do it, but it's one of those things where it depends on where they're at, and there may be a lot of people watching right now where they might be pretty far down the line with that progression. What does that look like if you're in that position with your loved one?
Yeah, so I always say that it's really important to have a good plan, and there's some good pieces of paperwork that you can have in place, and the earlier that you do it, the better it is going to be for everyone. So you had mentioned that you guys had a healthcare power of attorney, which was really great, right? Because then it prevented you from having to go and to the court and petition for a guardianship over your mother. Okay. And so healthcare power of attorneys are really important documents. Everyone should have one. Everyone should make it a huge priority to get that taken care of, because what that does is it appoints someone who can make decisions for you when you are not able to make decisions for yourself. But it also outlines some of the different treatments that you are willing to undergo. We also tell people it's really important to have a durable power of attorney in place as well, which is a separate document, and that allows people to navigate your finances on your behalf, especially if your loved one is starting to have a hard time with managing their bills, and you noticing that bills are stacking up and not getting paid, or they start to make a lot of donations, right? Everyone's calling them for money and they're happy to make that donation, but then forgetting that they're doing that. So the durable power of attorney helps you to be able to support them in their finances when they're no longer able to do that. And then it's important to have a will in place as well, because that prevents you from ever having to go through a probate process, which can delay things in after your loved one has passed away. So then lastly, you want to look at a living will type of document, which there's several examples online. There's the 5 Wishes, there's the Conversation Project, the ADRC, Aging, Disability and Resource Center, also has some forms on their website where then your loved one can go through and they can identify really what their end of life looks like. And it's so important because in those moments, you want to not have the burden of questioning your decision making, right? You want to be able to say, I'm executing the plan that my loved one wanted me to do, right? So I always say that these are really great gifts that you can give each other, and to make sure that even whether you're young or old, that you have these things in place. And knowing that all of these documents can be changed just depending on where you're at in your life. So what you decide in your early 20s is not necessarily what's going to fit you in your 60s anymore, right? But so that you have these in place.
Okay, so if I heard correctly, we need a power of attorney,
Healthcare power of
a
attorney.
healthcare power of attorney, a durable power of attorney for finances,
Yes,
a living will.
yes.
Is that separate from a will?
Yep, so a
general?
living will is not a necessary document, but it's a really helpful document to have.
And did I get them all?
And a regular will of
Oh,
your
the
estate.
regular will.
Yep.
The regular will.
Yep.
Yeah.
And there are other things as well, but if I had to think of this as the most crucial and important documents for your loved one to continue to be the captain of their ship, right? That these are really important to have in place.
And in my case, we ended up working with a family law attorney, and they were able to kind of get us taken care of
Yep.
in from end to end. And it wasn't a major fee, but it did help a lot. All these documents pretty much need to be notarized, and
Yeah.
that in and of itself is a trip somewhere where
Yeah.
they do that, and they do that at family law attorney spaces. So
Yeah.
is that where you suggest people go?
So there's a lot of different avenues that people that can go to pursue these different documents. So elder law attorneys are great partners in that. We at By Your Side Care Management help to support that process. So we work in conjunction with an elder law attorney to help get those documents completed. We have notaries on our staff, so we're able to help support. So that's where, when you're able to look for really comprehensive support systems, right, that work together, ultimately end up saving you quite a bit of money in this process. But there are upfront costs for those, right? And so we see, unfortunately, people come to us after they've maybe tried to navigate the system and they've had some setbacks. And so we hear often, oh, I wish we would have just reached out to you sooner, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's where, even with your mom, you guys were not in crisis. You were managing, things were fine, right? You were getting a little to the caregiver burnout stage, but you still were doing a great job, right? There was no disservice there. And so, but to think, and I wish everybody would reach out before they think it's even necessary, because that really helps you to make sound decisions, right? You're not panicking, you're not rushing, you're taking your time. And I remember there was an event and a milestone that you guys wanted to get to for your mom and have, a little celebration and a party and and that was great. And we were able to accomplish that. But had anything gone awry before, you already had a plan, you had we had a safety net, and we were ready, right? So that was really smart planning. So you and your mom and your family were able to achieve all the things you wanted to as kind of like your capstone, so that everybody felt good, right? And I remember we toured with your mom, and it was great that we were able to do that. And we say that the more involved and the earlier that you go into memory care, the better your outcome is going to be.
Okay, so in my family's scenario, we weren't in crisis mode. We were being as preventative and on top of it as we could. It was a little chaotic at times, but what does it look like if it is crisis mode and you don't have certain things in place?
So some signs that maybe your loved one is entering crisis mode is that they begin to have some food insecurity, which could be that they are actually hoarding expired food, or that they have limited access to food. And then we see housing becoming an issue, whether they're on the cusp of losing their housing for many reasons, whether it's financially they haven't been paying their bills, maybe they're starting to collect things and the house is now uninhabitable, or the cleanliness of the house is impacting their health. We also see medical comorbidities start to compound, which could lead into a fall, could lead into just not remembering that they've turned the stove on, right? These are all things that we start to see. And generally in the beginning, people are very good about saying, it's fine, everything's fine, it's great. But then as their cognitive decline continues, they may start to lean on neighbors who may or may not start with best of intentions. And then, that's when the wheels start to come off. When these systems in place start to deteriorate.
Yeah, I think for my mom, she would have been in crisis mode. It was crisis mode to what called me home and my family to make sure that someone was there at all times. If I realized that's a very difficult thing from my own experience to orchestrate. So what can people start putting in place at the base level in regards to making sure someone's with their parent or loved one?
Yeah, or even sometimes just making sure that access to easy to make foods, right? Take away that risk of the stove, those things. Do you have family in the area? If who can reasonably provide some caregiving? And that's usually where it starts. And then, as someone needs more help and support, looking to private paid options, such as care management services or caregiver services, to be able to help to stabilize the situation. We know that a good care plan involves multiple professionals or multiple family members all working together in order to ensure that someone is safe. So one of the biggest things is to make sure that when you're looking at your loved one and how it's going to look moving forward, that you are utilizing and accessing as many resources as you possibly can, because that burden doesn't have to fall completely on you.
And what sort of things should someone be looking out when they're privately seeking care professionals to work with their family?
Yeah, I think it's really important that they work as part of a comprehensive team, that no one should ever come in and say, I have the magic wand and I have all the answers and we're going to get this fixed. A lot of times there becomes really complex situations. And so looking at the service line of those care partners that are coming in to work with you. So, just as your physician office has layers, right? There's the doctor and there's the nurse and a medical assistant. And so just to make sure that you're approaching care for your loved one, that it's an interdisciplinary approach and that help comes in a lot of different ways. And some are free and low cost and some cost a little bit more money. Some services are covered under your insurance and some are not. And so just making sure that you're open and researching all of the available resources that you have.
Okay, so another question I wanted to get to was this getting my mother into a facility and shopping around for what was the best fit for her. Finances are a big part of this. It's very expensive.
It is.
What are the options for people when it comes to the cost involved, insurances? What does that look like?
So some people are really fortunate and they have long-term care policies that will help to pay for assisted living. Some families have enough assets to pay for a certain amount of years privately, and each community identifies what their private pay requirement is. And then some communities will then accept Medicaid funding, which is the public funding in order to pay for your continued care. So if you're looking through all of these different options, there's a lot of different pathways. And so that's why it's important to take the time to look at the resources and then determine a plan before it's total crisis time. But then also to protect those resources to make sure that nobody comes in and messes up your plan, right? So we know that there's a lot of people with good intentions and people with not so good intentions out there. And I think that that is one of the trickiest parts of navigating all of this, right? Is you have to, as a caregiver, put a lot of trust in people around you, right? So it's important to vet your companies, look at the reviews, talk to your friends and family and see who they would recommend for resources.
Do background checks on if you're getting private care in home, all of those sorts of things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you're going through not an agency and you're seeking care on your own, it's always important to do a background check to make sure that the people that you're allowing into your home are safe as they can be, right?
So what does it look like transitioning from home care into a facility? Could you walk me through that process from point A to B?
Sure. I think that every process for every person is very individual, but usually it starts with a tour and then a meeting with the admissions team, acceptance, both financially and clinically, and then coming up with the move-in plan. So what we see when your loved one goes into a memory care community, that they maybe were struggling at home and now they have a safe environment where they can engage in socialization. They have access to quicker medical care because usually there's some oversight there from a medical team. They have access to better nutrition. So unfortunately, people who are getting older and they eat less and they start to eat more processed foods and their diet becomes less inclusive of, a nourishing diet. And so a lot of times after the initial hurdles of settling into an assisted living type of community, we really see that person cognitively start to do a little bit better. We see that they are overall healthier and that their quality of life really improves. And then it allows the caregiver to have a pathway to be that supportive loved one again, right? Because they're no longer burdened with the responsibility of care and making all the decisions all the time, right? Now you've surrounded yourself with a team that helps to support you through that.
Yeah, I can speak personally to that. My mom is, I think, even still doing better now, coming up on a year and a half in her memory care floor, better than she was doing at home.
Yeah.
And I did my best with the cooking, and I think after she got in the nursing home, I lost maybe 15 pounds in the next couple months. And so that was something I definitely saw with her. Yeah. I can't imagine it's for every case, but my mom is doing better. And when it actually came to that time where we transitioned from her home to memory care, she was literally packing her bags, ready to go. The space that was her home was not her home anymore in her world. And so the transition was probably as smooth as it could have went. We did include her in those initial walkthroughs, and it was something we eventually we started doing the walkthroughs, just me and my older brother, because it was a little she did have a sense of maybe what was going on, and it was a little triggering for her. So we included her at the beginning, but ultimately decided and realized it was best that we tour on our own. But then when we were preparing to actually make that move, we had her come meet some of the staff, and she was impressed, I think, with the entryway and all the new faces and all of that. So I think it went smoother when we had her kind of get more involved on the back end of the logistics.
Yeah, and I think sometimes families can feel that they're being sneaky, right?
Sure.
And what you guys realized is that, you know, that first tour was really hard for everybody, right? And that maybe it was better to find what you felt is, you know, the family that knows her, what's going to make the most sense for her and what's going to click. And I think with the community that you guys chose, right, there's a heavy focus there on the arts and socialization and that type of enrichment. And so that was a really good fit. And I did bump into her last week when I was there with another client, and you know, she looked really healthy and really happy. And I remember just at the end and that last tour and going through with her, it was hard, but we had a team around us and everybody was really focused and we got through it. And I remember being really impressed with you and your brother, because it took a lot of patience and it was a really hard thing, and it was really vulnerable for your mom and it was vulnerable for you guys, and you know, it was a big change. And so, but I was happy that she could be there to go through it, and that you honored that within her, right? That she was the matriarch of your family, and that it was really important for you guys to include her, which can be hard, right? And that also brings us to, you know, how do we honor our loved one, right, that has some cognitive decline? And my opinion on that is always, you know, whether your loved one can no longer says I love you, or doesn't recognize that you're there and you're doing the things, right? And maybe they get mad at you, and you know, that can be really frustrating. But I really truly believe in my heart that at the end of the day, that as long as you show up and you're there to be with them in whatever place that they are, that I think there's an inner sense of knowing for your loved one, right? And so whatever we believe in that happens after, right, that I believe that that's always carried with them. And I have to hope that that's the case, right? And that they know that you were there and that you were acting in their best interest.
Yeah, that really resonates, and I think I'm experiencing that each day. When I visit my mom, I try to get over there as much as I can. At the beginning of this caregiving process, I did view it as more of a mission, a little bit of a burden, definitely, and along the way realized how rewarding this caring for my mother can be, and caring for people with cognitive impairment that need help. I had a neighbor when I started caring for my mom. He cared for his wife with cancer before she passed away, and he just said, "You won't regret this." And that became my mantra during this time, and boy, was he right. So,
and I think you were very smart in that you had done that reflection where you knew where your caregiving capacity was, right? Because you're a young professional, right? And you have a lot of responsibilities that, you know, we're all juggling. And this, I say that they say we're the sandwich generation. I really say we're like the club sandwich generation, but like, because I think there's so many layers, right, to what people are going through now, and just, you know, in navigating the senior care industry, and there's a lot of choices, and, you know, but you were definitely an early adopter to getting that support, which then helped you to, you know, navigate this system for longer.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that reflection on my experience, and thank you for joining us here today with your wisdom and your experience on this matter. Where can people reach out if they need help?
Yeah, so I work for a company called By Your Side Care Management, and our families come to us and privately pay for us to help them to navigate the healthcare system. So whether they're looking at a new diagnosis or multiple medical comorbidities, we have a lot of resources at our disposal. So we have nurses on staff and social workers, and we work with a lot of really great community partners, and we're able to to be there to be an advocate for our clients. So whether that's that they're in an assisted living or a nursing home or even in the hospital, we're able to show up and to be there to be supportive, just to make sure that things are going okay, and that then also looking forward so that the plan is not just right now, but what does the future look like and how are we going to get there? So helping to make sure that people financially have looked at what they have and are utilizing the appropriate care at the right time.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
And do you serve Wisconsin? Is it regional? Is it national?
So we have an office that serves southeastern Wisconsin, and then we also have an office up in Green Bay, which serves that area regionally as well. And we serve not only the Wisconsin area, but we do have partners across the nation. So we do have some resources for people who maybe aren't in Wisconsin, but need a little help to get pointed in the right direction.
Well, great. Well, again, thanks so much, Jessica, for the conversation today. Tune in to Trusted Life Circle for more. We're here to help. Make sure you're taking care of yourself out there, and thanks for watching.